Alright, Dave. Time to roll some damage.
Whoa, that's a lot of dice, Ted. What did you cast? Fireball or something?
Nah, I just, hit the orc with my rapier.
Yeah, but you got like a dozen dice there.
Well, Dave, let's talk about D&D damage rolling the most dice.
Welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Steve, and as usual, I'm joined by this nerd.
Nerdarchy Ted.
Want more D&D videos in your YouTube feed? Then strike true that subscribe button.
But if it's more Nerdarchy videos you're after, unleash your fury on that notification bell.
Let's take a moment to tell you about the sponsor of this video. It's a Kickstarter that's going on right now. Deck of Stories. It's a collaboration between Critical Dice and 1985 Games. 1985 Games has been a friend of the channel for quite some time now. We love their products. So we're probably going to love this one as well because they just put out quality product after quality product. The Deck of Stories is a collection of interesting and captivating story hooks meant to be used in your favorite tabletop role-playing game.
So whether you're stuck at a moment and, need a sidetrack or need a diversion, whether you want to use these to help build your campaign or just run one-shots, these things are designed with great story hooks, great tie-ins. You can be able to use these over and over again. It's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing the final product. You have to check out the Kickstarter. Link is going to be down in the description below.
Let's explain exactly what we're talking about here. We're talking about D&D weapon damage and what is the most dice or bonuses we can get to that damage, the pluses and the different ways of getting it. It's not going to be a specific, character build per se, but maybe we'll do that later. So we're going to start off with races, and really there's only a couple that actually add to your damage.
All right, so we're looking at half orc, that if you score a critical hit, you're going to be able to add an extra weapon die to that particular damage roll. And we've also got goblin, which is going to be Fury of the Small, allowing you to add your level to the damage to one attack.
Yeah, and the half orc ability is called Savage Attacks, so it's just those two. Moving into feats, we have a couple that you can use to add different ways to add damage dice to your attacks, or straight up, just extra damage.
So there's two that just going to add straight to your damage roll. Great Weapon Fighting and Sharpshooter allow you to take a -5 to hit to take a +10 to damage. Obviously, there's the prerequisites of either fighting with a two-handed weapon with Great Weapon Fighting, or whether you're, fighting with a ranged weapon for Sharpshooter. And then Martial Adept is going to allow you to get a Battlemaster Maneuver and a Superiority die, which is going to be a die 6, unless you actually have Fighter and Battlemaster levels and already have access to Superiority dice. But, getting those extra maneuvers, some of those options do allow you to just add an extra weapon damage die of that d6.
Now, there is one more, Magic Initiate. You can use it to take either Ranger, or you could, I don't know why you would ever take Ranger, because you won't get a lot of the benefits, or Warlock. Warlock's going to grant you access to Hex. Granted, you can only use it once a day, or, so basically one fight, and then it's done, but it is an option.
So that's either Hex or Hunter's Mark, to grab those spells. So next up, we're looking at fighting styles, and, a number of martial classes give you access to, that fighting style choice. And for this one, we're only really looking at one of them, dueling. And this is if you're fighting with a single weapon in one hand. That is going to allow you to do a +2 to damage.
And you can snag that at first or second level, depending on which martial classes you go with. Now, for spells, there's quite a few of them that will add dice to your damage. And there's a lot of different ways to get there. So there's a couple cantrips, both Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade will add extra damage dice. And the great things about these is, as you go up in level, they also will increase in their damage.
Next up, we have Enlarge. Technically, it's Enlarge Reduce, but for the sake of adding things, we definitely don't want Reduce here. That's just going to add an extra d4 of whatever type of damage you're dealing, as your size is considered one bigger.
Yeah, and then you have Hunter's Mark and Hex. They're very similar in the sense that they add a D6 to each of your to your attacks when you make them, and you can only focus them on one creature at a time, and then you have to move them around. But an extra D6 every time you attack, can't go wrong there.
All right, so next one is a powerful one. That's Tensor's Transformation, and this spell, as I said, it's powerful, high-level spell that you can't cast any other spells while you're using it, but it's going to add 2d12 force damage to your attack. That is a lot of amount of damage, so, have fun with that one.
Next up, we have Smite spells. There's actually 7 Smite spells. They range from 1st to 5th level. The damage is also ranges, and generally there's also another effect that goes along with it. So Smite spells are definitely really good. So you have Banishing, Blinding, Branding, Searing, Staggering, Thunders, and Wrathful.
Now, one of the fun things about these spells, if you're not doing something else with your concentration, you could technically cast one, and then after you hit, be able to smite on top of your hit, doubling up your spells with a single attack. Smiting is incredibly powerful. All right, so we're going to move into magic items. Now, we look at the fact that, anytime you have a +1 or a +2, 3, they're going to add to damage. So for our weapons, we want to look at things that are going to add dice or straight up extra damage to your damage rolls. So into the elemental ones, you've got a Flame Tongue, which is going to add 2d6 fire damage, or your Frostbrand, which is going to add a d6 cold damage.
Next up, we also have a Staff of Striking, and that's based off of charges. You can spend 1 to 3 charges to get a die 6 per charge, and that's force damage, is nice. You have your Sword of Wounding, which causes bleed damage, an extra d4 until you stop bleeding. Not bad. Dwarven Throw is an extra die 8 when you throw it. 2 die 8 if it happens to be a giant. Then we kind of go into a category that is, if you roll an at 20, these weapons just do more damage.
So the Sword of Sharpness is going to do an extra 14 damage on a crit. And then the Vicious Weapon and the Mace of Smiting are going to do an additional +7 damage, again, if you score that critical hit.
So now we're going to look at character classes. And first up, Artificer, we get weapon infusions. You can get access to them at 2nd level. It can give you a +1 or +2 to damage. Also, we have Arcane Jolt. You don't get that till 9th level. That's also a Battlesmith ability.
Next we're going to move into Barbarian. You get access to Rage at 1st level. If you go with the Zealot at 3rd level, you're going to get Divine Fury. And then who can't forget, the amazing Brutal Critical that Barbarians get.
And then that Brutal Critical is going to do extra weapon damage when you get up there at the higher levels and you score a crit. Next up, we have Bard. Bard has some ways to use Bardic Inspiration in order to add damage dice. Both the Blade and the Whispers has the ability to expend your inspiration and add extra damage effects to what you're doing.
So moving into Fighter, there's going to be several different ways that you're going to be able to add some extra damage. With the Arcane Archer, you're going to get Arcane Shot at 3rd level. If you go with the Battle Master, you're going to get Combat Superiority and be able to have those superiority dice and those maneuvers. So if you choose the ones that are going to actually add to damage, and those things will scale as you gain in level. And then, of course, with the Champion, you're going to have Improved Critical, giving you the chance of, lowering that threshold of where you can score critical, essentially doubling your dice pool.
Next up, we have Monk. Monk actually offers you a bunch of options through the Kensei subclass in order to add damage. You have Kensei Shot at 3rd level. It's a die 4. Death Strike is once per round. You can add, an extra martial arts die of damage at 6th level. And then Sharpen the Blade at 11th is where you basically add a static bonus of 1, 2, or 3.
As we kind of, briefly mentioned when we were talking about the spells, the Paladin gets access to the Smite ability at 2nd level, and that's the ability to sacrifice your spell slots when you've scored a hit to be able to do a number of die 8 per level of the spell slot that you've sacrificed +1, unless it's undead, and then you're going to add another d8 on top of that. So it's super useful for, hey, I've already hit and I just want to unload some extra damage.
And eventually at the higher levels, you also get an additional d8 as well. So yeah, so you're going to eventually max out at, I believe it's 6 die 8 plus if it happens to be undead or a fiend or something, you can get a bonus there as well.
All right, so next up, we're looking at Ranger. And under Gloomstalker at 3rd level, you're going to get Dread Ambusher.
Horizon Walker, you're going to get the Planar Warrior. Also, we're going to get access to Colossus Slayer at 3rd level and Slayer's Prey. These are all just essentially different subclasses that are each going to give you an ability that adds additional dice.
So next up, we're going to look at Rogue. And, the thing that Rogue is famous for is rolling a lot of dice. The Rogue Fireball is already, been a thing for years. And that's sneak attack. You get access to it at 1st level and every odd level thereafter. So they get a pool of dice up to a whopping 10d6 that they can add when the sneak attack is going to apply.
Next up, we have Warlock. Surprisingly, Warlock gives you a few options as well. Hurl through hell from the Fiend Pact Warlock. I mean, it's when you hit with a weapon attack, but you don't get it until 14th level. It's a lot of damage. Hexblade Curse is awesome because you have the ability to add your Charisma modifier to damage. Your threat range is improved, so there's a couple of ways there. We already mentioned Hex the spell earlier. Eldritch Smite is an Eldritch Invocation you can access at 5th level. That is kind of like the Paladin Smite, but you can only use a Warlock spell slots. And then there is the Life Drinker ability where you can then add your Charisma modifier as damage.
So last, we're going to look at Wizard. And if we're looking at Blade Singer, at 14th level, you're going to get the Song of Victory.
Yeah, you eventually will get to add your Intelligence modifier to your damage.
So this winds up giving us access to a lot of different things. And, Dave and I, wound up, pouring through the numbers. And, we came up with how many dice are you rolling for this particular attack? We're not going to do a full-on character sheet for this, but if you'd like to see us do a character build, please let us know. But if you start off with Goblin, you're going to be able to take that and add your level to the damage. If you take a lot of levels of Rogue, you're going to be able to add in all of those sneak attack dice. You're going to be able to take 2 levels of Paladin. This is going to give us access to Smite. For those Rogue levels, we're going to take 18 of them, and we're going to make sure we take Arcane Trickster to get those spell slots. We have a couple of feats that we're looking at. We want to take Martial Adept to be able to get a superiority die. Might only be a d6, but it's an extra d6 we can add to an attack. And then we're going to take Magic Initiate to be able to get access to that Warlock spell, Hex. Now, as we're getting ready to dive into combat, we're going to need a weapon. Obviously, we need something that's going to classify for our Paladin Smite attack as well as our Rogue Sneak attack. So we're going to take a Rapier. This is a very, fightery, which means we need a fighting style, which means we're going to take Dueling. So we're only using the one weapon. And then when we go to make that attack, that Rapier is going to be a Flame Tongue to do an extra 2d6 fire damage on our attacks.
So that's going to give us 12 dice 6 plus 9d8 plus level plus stat. And the way we get there is we have 96 from our rogue levels. We're going to Smite as a 5th level or 4th level spell for 5d8, but then we're going to use Blinding Smite to bring that up for another 3d8. We've incorporated our Martial Adept in this one. We did not use our Warlock Hex die because we cannot have the Hex going at the same time as our Blinding Smite, but that's okay because we're going to sacrifice a die 6 to pick up 3d8. I think that's the most dice we can roll with this type of build.
So, I mean, that's 21 dice that you're rolling. That's pretty darn impressive. It's possible that we missed something, and if you got better than we did, please, I'd love to hear about it.
And also the great part about this, if you crit, that you're then going to roll 42 dice instead. At that point, it's a meteor swarm. So if you like when we do optimizing videos, you can check out the build that we did for the strongest character in D&D ever.
We don't just create builds, though. If you want to check out some of the awesome 5e content that we're creating every month, you might want to check us out over on Patreon.
But that isn't all. We do weekly Patreon live chats, monthly giveaways, our patrons are automatically entered in, and more.
So until next time, stay nerdy.